And welcome, chat. Whereas this great American republic has seen 48 presidencies in its illustrious history, so tonight we come upon the 48th episode of American Spirits, an event of at least equal import. Joining us as always is our beloved Southwest expert, Mr. Thomas Wayne Riley. How are you doing, sir?
Very good. Thank y'all for having me.
Excellent. And with us up until I hit stream was Mr. George Bagby. He's dropped out, it seems, of the call, but hopefully he will be back with us. But in his absence, Mr. Riley, when we last left, the Mexican War was in full swing, and we were coming up upon the Battle of Monterrey. What is the next step in the proceeding of events?
So after the two Resaca de la Palma and the other battle, Los Palma, whatever, they stayed in the Mexican side of the border on the other side of the Rio Grande for quite some time. Miserable conditions. An enormous amount of volunteers and regulars died from diseases in these various towns they stayed at. Camargo being a big one. It had just had a huge flood. It's on the San Juan River, I think, which goes into the Rio Grande right there pretty much at that town. And it was just filled with sand from the flood. It was horrible conditions that these men camped in for months, waiting on more volunteers to come. These were like that, those initial battles was just the regular army.
Hmm.
And so they were waiting for volunteers, which were just rapidly coming in from the states all the time, mostly
This
southern
raises a
states, but
question: was the Mexican War another army of the Grand Republic situation, where they spun up a separate army to fight
yes.
alongside the regular army, or was it all regular army?
No, it was Polk was a Democrat in the Jeffersonian vein, and he felt like true armies are Republican armies of civilians who muster and gather and go fight as civilians. And
Interesting.
so that was the bulk of Taylor's army. He had a lot of regulars. I mean, he had, I think, something like a third of the entire regulars of the entire military or army. But he also had a bunch of volunteers. Famously, Jefferson Davis had his Mississippi regiment, and they had really nice guns, up to the date guns as opposed to the smooth bore muskets the regulars had.
Hmm.
And there were a
Mr.
bunch.
Bagby, are you back? We hear you now. Wonderful. Not at all. We were just beginning our discussion, and Mr. Riley, what were you saying?
So they were camped in these horrible towns. They didn't like them. Finally, they were on the move. And the Texas Rangers, they had their own volunteer unit. They were kind of the scouts, the forward team. They would kind of plot the way, say this way isn't good for wagons and cannons. This way isn't good because there's no water. So they finally made it. They went through some beautiful towns. It slowly got more mountainous and cooler because it was hot. Disease deaths kind of tapered off after they started the move. And then by by September 19th, they were at Monterey.
Hmm. Before we launch into the battle itself, Mr. Bagby, did you have any foreground you wanted to lay? Oh no.
Oh no. He does have really good insight into the Mexican politics. Oh, there he's back. Okay.
You're back. We
Yes,
hear you
sir.
again. Entertaining Mexican history. Mr. Bagby, can you hear us?
It's because of Ohio.
It is all the Ohioans' fault, and he's gone. All right, well, screw Mexican political instability. Continue, Mr. Riley.
We'll have to come back to that because it's entertaining in the saddest way, but I'll let him get into that. So, okay, can we? What do you think?
Are you back, George? We
Yes,
hear
sir.
you fine.
I'm being told that you cannot be heard by the masses. So,
Huh.
unfortunately.
Neither chat can you hear Mr. Riley and I because I've lost all visual indication that you can hear us.
So, Herrera was overthrown. I think I mentioned this before. Herrera was overthrown by Paredes after Herrera gave him a bunch of money and funds and guns to go take California back. And Paredes said, nope, I'm just going to take the Mexican government instead. So Paredes used the funds and instead of saving California, overthrew Herrera.
Mr. Bagby, are you back? I hear you and Mr. Riley hears you, but I don't. Oh, because you dropped out of the call, I have to plug you back into OBS. That's why. One sec, chat. We will resume regular services in a second. Okay. No, don't replace Mr. Riley. Professional podcasting, ladies and gentlemen. We are experts.
Best and the brightest. We're almost as good as Jay Bird.
Mr. Bagby, speak.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Okay, we are back. Excellent. We are, in fact, so back. Please continue to regale us with the stories of the stability of the Mexican political system.
Okay. Sorry about that. We were talking some time ago about Jose Herrera, who was president in 45, right before the war began, how he did not receive President Polk's envoy, John Slidell. Herrera was up against really hardliners, and they thought that he was being too conciliatory in the matter of Texas. And so he's president for less than a year. He gets overthrown in a junto just before the war is declared. He's replaced by General Paredes Arrillaga, or is it Arrillaga? I
Probably
never had
Arrillaga. But I just call him
Arrillaga.
Paredes.
Okay. He is a hardliner in the matter of Texan matters. He wants to reconquer Texas. He was actually sent by Herrera towards the border. He instead goes to Mexico City and through popular acclaim overthrows Herrera. He presides over the disasters early in the war, is blamed for them. He's trying to centralize the government, kind of like Santa Anna did, kind of trying to curtail state powers. He faces internal revolts, especially in Guadalajara, where there's an uprising against him. He rides off towards the Rio Grande to take personal command, and while he is gone, his government gets overthrown by yet another junto. So we're just getting up to the point of the siege of Monterrey. We're setting that up. General Jose Mariano Salas is taking over things in early September of 46 as Taylor is approaching Monterrey. So we've already gone through 3 regimes from the lead up to the Mexican War. Just in the course of a year, we've already gone through 3 Mexican regimes. So incredibly unstable. Paredes gets imprisoned first, then he gets exiled to France. So this is a real sharp contrast, very unstable stuff. We've been talking about the invasion of Taylor. Taylor crosses the Rio Grande, marches on Monterrey, which is the most important and these days also one of the wealthiest of the Mexican cities, as I understand it. The capital of Nuevo Leon, which is one of the northeastern states of Mexico, up on the Rio Grande. It's
And
on a
the home-
river.
And the home to some premium Jack.
What is that?
Monterey Jack cheese.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Sorry.
Is that Monterey Jack? Is
I
that
have no
Mexican
idea.
cheese?
It may be California Coast Monterey Jack, but I don't know. Good question.
I always thought that was California cheese.
We'll have to get the Sons of Wisconsin to weigh in. They are the experts on these matters.
I'm sure. So, August of 46, Taylor is marching his way down into Nuevo Leon. He begins his assault of Monterey on September 20th. So he sends the Texas Division out to attack the city. The Texas Division is an interesting unit. I just love how the army is organized in the Mexican War, organized by states, frequently with the political leadership of the state, like the sitting leadership in officer roles leading the volunteers.
Or sitting
This is
congressmen that resigned to take men into battle, like Jefferson Davis.
this is the way of a traditional republic. This is just so manly. This is responsibility manifest. These are responsible men, and Taylor is leading an army of volunteers here. He does have some regulars at the beginning, but these divisions that are all organized by states.
I would
With
call
the
for the
state levies.
renewal of this practice, except that it would inevitably result with our current Congress in military disaster.
Absolutely. Well, the Texas division is led by the sitting governor of Texas, Governor Henderson, is leading the division. So Taylor has a complex plan of assault. This is a fortified city. It's also a very sizable city.
Can I describe the city?
Please do.
So it sits on a plateau on the banks of the Rio Santa Catarina, which is the same river as I think the San Jose River, which feeds into the Rio Grande. And so they kind of followed this river from Camargo all the way to Monterey. To the east, south, and west of Monterey are the Sierra Madre Oriental, not the Occidental, but the Oriental. And they wrap around those sides. And on the south, they wrap around, and that's pretty much like an impenetrable wall. And then the river's on the south. They built a whole bunch of forts. The Citadel, the Black Citadel is what they called it. The Tannery, the El Diablo. They fortified within the city. They built walls through streets to corral the invading army to where they wanted to. So they would have to be corralled through the streets with these impromptu built walls, and then they would open up into a big street where there would be just grape shot waiting for the Americans. They also, the Citadel is not in the city. It's to the north west of the city, but it has 30 something cannons in it, 300 men, and it has a 360-degree view. And so they can see the plain. The Americans arrive from the north, and they're in this grove is where they set up camp, and they can see the city, and they have to go through this plain and then crest up to the plateau to get to the city. And the Black Fort can see this and can just rain down cannons. And they're shooting actual solid cannonballs, not grape shot. And that destroys the Tennessee first. But so interestingly, the night before the Americans arrive, Ampudia orders every single fort in the city destroyed. And they are halfway destroying the forts because they're just going to abandon the city and go to Saltillo. When he changes his mind and says, no, rebuild the forts. Never mind. Because he got news that the Americans are like right there. They don't have time to evacuate. So they spend, the Mexicans, all night before the initial invasion, the initial battle starts, rebuilding forts. So the Mexicans are tired, hungry, thirsty, and for 3 days they've been drinking mezcal. That's my little background of the everyone, not everyone. It was called by at least 4 different people a perfect Gibraltar, the city itself. It was going to be really tough to siege. Bridges were fortified with cannons. Every roof in the entire city had men on it. And they even had sandbags on the roof, and the Mexican soldiers were behind them. Now, of course, much like Taylor's army, this army was, instead of, it wasn't a volunteer army, it was a conscripted army as well as regulars. And so a lot of these guys don't have fighting experience, but they're ready to defend, their country. And so it was stacked against the Mexicans the whole time, but they still put up an incredible defense, as we'll hear.
Forces are almost equal, and this is a strange feature up to this point, where we've seen this huge disparity of power on the field. In Monterrey, the Americans field around 6,000. The Mexicans have over 7,000. So we see a rough equality in numerical power, but the Americans not only have slightly less men, but they're assailing these very well fortified positions and an urban district, which has its own serious challenges. So this is a very tough situation. General Taylor, yes,
Real
go
quick,
ahead.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention the enormous hills on the west side of town that guard the pass to Saltillo, Federation and Independence, or Federación and Independencia. They have forts on top, and they have a bunch of cannons, and they got men. Yeah, so they're going to be an impediment as well, but as we'll read, General Worth will take care of those.
So General Taylor has a two-pronged assault on September 20th. He sends Worth on a march to flank attack Monterrey, while the Texas Division attacks from the north directly. General Worth is almost intercepted by a Mexican counterattack who isolates him on his march, and they realize that the generals are riding out in front of the army, General Worth and his staff. They're all out in front of their divisions, and they've gone a little in advance on reconnaissance. This is wild. General Worth is actually doing some of his own reconnaissance. Personal responsibility. This would have never happened in the Civil War, even a few years later. They would have delegated those kinds of attacks, but these men are taking such a personal role in it. They don't want to delegate this. They want to do it themselves. Worth is almost intercepted, killed, or captured, but realizes his exposed position. He sees some Mexican cavalry coming out of the city. They've been waiting in ambush for him, and he narrowly escapes back to his division. And meanwhile, the Texas Division they're running up against stiff resistance down by the gates of the city. This, after a day, involves penetration of the city streets themselves. And so we see house-to-house fighting, fighting in the streets of Monterrey. Another character on the scene there is General David Twiggs. Riley, do you have any impressions of David Twiggs?
Yeah, he was in charge of the Texas Division in 1861, and he defended the Alamo. There was no shots fired when the Knights of the Golden Circle and the Texas militia overtook the Alamo, surrounded it, and Twiggs gave the key and the Department of Texas over to the Texans, which facilitated their invasion of New Mexico and Arizona. And Twiggs joined the Confederate Army. Although he didn't see much action, he died of old age. In this Battle of Monterrey, he was to lead. Taylor split up his army into 3 divisions, and he was to lead one of the divisions. But instead, the night before, he had this bright idea that if I get shot in the gut, I could die from disease. So he took a bunch of laxatives and OD'd. He was not able to lead his men. So seems like a funny guy, but I have a special place in my heart for him because of what he did in 1861. But yeah,
Prophylaxis against gut shots. Amazing.
yeah, he thought, well, if I get shot, then I won't have bile, or I don't know what he was thinking. They didn't quite have the elevated, medical science that we have now. But yeah, that was his thinking.
I-
He OD'd.
I know that he was indisposed. I didn't know the reason why. They had to pass his command as subordinate.
Yep,
And
that's
that
why.
was the first case of Montezuma's revenge.
Yeah.
What I
Well,
remember about General David Twiggs of Augusta, Georgia, there are actually streets named after Twiggs there in Augusta. He was given command of the key city of New Orleans the first year of the Civil War, and he was so elderly and decrepit, he couldn't walk. He was not mobile anymore. He couldn't tour the military installations, the fortresses and such. He just couldn't get around, and he eventually applies for relief. But it was partly his reputation made in the Mexican War that he was an experienced and educated engineer. That's why they put him in charge of New Orleans. But he does die soon after his resignation, and was buried in Augusta, Georgia. Kind of a disastrous commander of the department at New Orleans, because he was totally incapable, but seems to have been incapable even in Monterey.
I believe he does go on and do other stuff in the war. Just this particular beginning of the battle. This is a 3-day battle siege of Monterey. And in the beginning, yeah, he was incapable of commanding.
Incidentally, we were talking about General Worth, the namesake of Fort Worth, Texas. Goes on to a career in Texas. Well, another officer on the scene is Ulysses S. Grant, who is a logistics specialist, quartermaster. He is moving up supplies for Taylor. Grant
Against his wish. He wanted to fight. But
absolutely.
his commanders understood his worth, and they put him in the back. Now, he completely, in the heat of battle, he rides to the city and fights anyways, but and fights valiantly. But
Indeed,
supposed to be
yes. He goes into the city during the house-to-house fighting to bring up supplies to the rear of the units engaged. He discovers platoons whose officers have been killed. He has rank, and he decides to jump in and take charge. He begins directing units. He turns over his mount to another officer who has lost his mount in the fight, and he is distinguished for his gallantry and his initiative, taking charge of the situation with a bunch of non-commissioned soldiers, without a commander on the spot to direct their actions. He starts directing their actions in
that
this
officer,
very difficult.
That officer he gave his horse to died minutes later.
Yes, indeed. Grant describes this in his memoirs. He describes going into these houses made of adobe and battering down holes in the walls so they can advance into the next room down the street. Riley, you're muted.
The Texans are the ones that taught them this. The Texans who fight it at Mier and San Antonio de Bexar. How they fought house to house by breaking the walls or going on the roof and putting holes in the roof. They taught the U.S. Army how to do urban combat. When they first entered the city, they marched in rows down the street, only to be every roof had a Mexican on it, and the roads had grape shot faced towards them. they lost tens of men. And so eventually the Texans were like, once the Texan volunteers were called in, they were like, hold on, this is not how you fight urban combat. We have to go into a building because these buildings touch, think of Santa Fe, they touch. And so you go into a building and you break the wall into the next building. And that's how it's not, the Battle of Monterey isn't necessarily street fighting, although there's plenty of that. It's house to house by breaking the walls or going on the roof and then breaking a hole into the roof and dropping down. They didn't have grenades. They just dropped down and just opened fire with their pistols and then would take that. I mean, it was room to room, building to building, a lot less street fighting because they really fortified the streets. They corralled the U.S. Army into points where they would be slaughtered. And so it was room to room, house to house, breaking down all day like fighting. And it was because of the Texans.
Absolutely. They had experience. They were the seasoned veterans for this kind of warfare. And this was not something that they were teaching at West Point at the time. So this corresponds with the major concerns of Taylor, his officers, and also General Grant. Well, future General Grant. He's a lesser officer at this point. They all express in their correspondence and their memoirs their reticence to attack this urban area full of civilians. They don't want to risk civilian casualties, and this deserves a special point. This is a old American tradition, and it's broader Western tradition. We can take this all the way back to medieval Europe, where attacking unarmed civilians is a moral enormity. This is to be avoided at all costs. Practically, they don't want to engage in military maneuvers in the city. They don't want to shell the city and so on because of all the innocent people there. And so Taylor is especially concerned about this and is holding off tactics and assaults because of his consideration for the civilians. Grant also expresses the same concerns many times in his memoirs. And both Taylor and Grant, the West Point educated military elite here, are eager to find some means to avoid unnecessary suffering by the civilian population. We talked about the state of the Mexican army in the siege of Monterey, the assault of the city. They're demoralized. They're badly equipped. We have a bunch of conscripts and regulars, not very many volunteers, not very many self-starters. Not much initiative among the general population like we're seeing among the Americans. And they've also been given a very uncertain kind of leadership. They don't know who's in charge of their government from one month to the other. The policies are changing dramatically. We have wannabe military dictators replaced by constitutional Republicans and Federalists. And though they're defending their country, they're sent into Monterey to build all of these fortifications for many months. They're told to destroy the fortifications, to retreat. Then they are countermanded, rebuild the fortifications as soon as possible. We have to stand our ground. They have very uncertain leadership. They have very poor equipment. The government of Mexico City is bankrupt. They do not have any lines of credit. They cannot fund any sort of military effort or supply for their men. Their men are horribly equipped, terribly fed, and they're very demoralized. And the general Amudia, the replacement for General Arista, who had overseen the disasters up on the Rio Grande, he gets replaced by someone that's better in touch with the new regime in Mexico City. Amudia knows that his men are about to break because they're so demoralized and they're so pressured in the midst of the city. He reaches out on September 21st or 24th for truce arrangements with Taylor. He wants to retreat from the city. Taylor,
should we talk about
yeah,
the
go
battle
ahead.
at all?
Yes, go right ahead.
I'll try to make it as brief as possible. So Worth is going around. He gets intercepted by the Lancers, the Mexican Lancers, who were just completely unequipped for the Americans' rifles. The Americans talk glowingly of the leader of the Lancers, whose men just scattered literally to the mountains as soon as the first volley of Americans goes. Takes down a bunch of Lancers. The rest just go. The leader of the Lancers charges into the Americans and is shot down, but he's written glowingly about. After that, they assault Worth and the Texans and the volunteers and a few regulars. They assault the first hill. They climb up the steepest side, which is where the Mexicans did not put defenses because it was too steep. They're like, the Americans aren't going to climb this very steep. I think it was a 400-foot hill. So they're not going to climb that pretty steep hill. They did. They get to the top. They take the fort. They killed the Mexicans before they could scuttle the cannon. They turn the cannon around and they start lobbing shells at the other hill. And amazingly, the first shell hit the cannon in the other fort and just spins it around like a top. And so they kind of wait there until nightfall. And then when night comes at 2 a.m., they climb up the steep side of the 700-foot hill. Independencia, I think. Yeah, I don't remember which one they took first, Federation or Independence. But they take that. The sun is rising when they're at the very top. They've been going up as quietly as they can. But towards the top, the Mexicans, it's still like dawn, pre-dawn. They're shooting down. None of the Americans get hit. The Americans aren't even wasting time shooting at the Mexicans above them. They finally crest at sunrise, overwhelmingly take this fort, and realize there's another fort beneath it. It's called Bishop's Castle, I believe. And it's this beautiful fort, and it is fortified. They're lobbing shells, nothing's going on. And so the Americans, who only showed about 30 or 40 men to charge the fort just to kind of see what it was like, and this is all on top of this big hill that overlooks the city. So they charge down. They kind of get get some reconnaissance on the defense. They charge back up, and they're like, there's no way we can take this without losing all of our guys who are tired after an all-night climb up. And so I don't remember who it was, but somebody goes, okay, well, once everybody is on the top of the hill, let's have them hide. We will go down and, do a feint. Like it's like, a ruse de guerre. We're going to go down, pretend like we're going to fight, and then we're going to run back. The Mexicans will no doubt chase us. That is exactly what happened. And as soon as the Americans were behind the rocks, they all lifted, 1,000 of them stood up and just obliterated the Mexicans. The ones still inside the fort decided to just run. They just left the fort, ran down the hill into Monterey, or they ran to the mountains. So those two massive fortifications, those two hills, Federation and Independence, were taken. This was on the second day. The second day, Taylor didn't send his men back into the city. They were kind of regrouping because on the first day, taking the tannery, which was a fort, the Mississippi volunteers, Ohio volunteers, and Tennessee volunteers took that fort at great cost to the Tennessee. Pretty horrific quotes, but they charged up it. Jefferson Davis led the charge actually with his lieutenant, and they charged up. They took the fort. Then they took another fort behind it called the Distillery. And then Jefferson Davis himself chased Mexicans who were fleeing to the distillery, busted the door open, and the Mexicans inside gave him his sword, the commander, and said, we don't fight. So, all right, you go. You guys are now prisoners of war. So then at that night, they kept those forts that they took, only those two. And then on the second day, they decided we cannot attack. We lost too many men. We need to recoup, regather, regroup. And so while they were regrouping, Worth took those two hills. The third day, they go back in to the city. And it's the exact same thing, house to house, room to room. And at the same time, Worth had now sent his men from the two hills into the opposite side of the city. So now the Americans are approaching the central plaza from two sides, all of them going house to house, roof to roof. And once they start taking the roofs, they can start sniping the men on the cannons. And the Texans also taught them a trick that you can go to the end of a building, knock a hole at the floor, and just shoot the legs of the men who are arming the cannon. And then
Mhm.
eventually they just stop manning the cannons because there's a whole bunch of injured and dead men around the cannon. So then that spot is now taken. They do this all day, and eventually Ampudia, sending out the same commander who gleefully raised up the hand of every man during the black bean incident to show the people if it was a black or a white bean. They sent him out with the white flag saying we want to make terms, and the Texans almost killed him right there. They almost killed that guy because he had caused so much death to the expedition at Mir. I don't know. I don't speak Spanish. And so eventually, yes, yeah, well, I'll let you take it back over. But that's the battle, very condensed. I have a 3-hour episode on it in my series, just this battle of Monterey. There's a lot in there. It's very exciting, but a lot of quotes. But yeah, that's my very quick summation of the Battle of Monterey.
Wonderful. So we move on into the controversial negotiations that result from this. Amudia knows that he can't hold the city, that the assaults will continue, and Taylor is much averse to continuing urban assaults. He does not want to risk unnecessary loss of life among the civilians. This is very impressive to Grant, and Grant takes this as a major inspiration. In his memoirs, Grant says he commends Taylor's humane policy of trying to avoid civilian loss of life. He said he commemorates the humane policy of our commander to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Taylor controversially makes a deal with Amudia. He allows for a ceasefire to span a couple of days to allow Amudia to withdraw his forces from Monterey, and Taylor then takes occupation of Monterey.
And they give him a proper military send-off. The Americans, Ampudia, they line the streets and they let them march on the road to Saltillo. And Texans were mad, but everyone else was like, okay, yeah, this is a good thing to do.
Yeah, it's a merciful thing to do, and they treat them in an extraordinary way in a time of war. It's an honorable sort of gesture. Of course, this does not go over well with the political class. President Polk.
I could quote his diary.
Yes, go ahead.
It was a great mistake. It will only enable the Mexican army to reorganize and recruit so as to make another stand.
Indeed. So obviously there is no rapid communication. This news takes some weeks to filter back to Washington, and Polk is upset about this, not in the least, because Taylor is a Whig. Oh dear. Am I back?
Yeah, you're here.
Okay. Taylor is a Whig. Everyone knows that Taylor has political ambitions, and from the start, Polk was very concerned that he was equipping his own political opposition potentially in the war. He really wants to advance fellow Democrats to military roles. Yes, Riley.
So on that, in author Haynes' book that he wrote on President Polk, he says, not since Andrew Jackson's victory at New Orleans had the nation indulged in such hero worship. By late summer 1846, 2 biographies of the general were in print. Plays such as The Siege of Monterey or The Triumph of Rough and Ready, his nickname, were rushed into production within hours after the news of victory was received and performed to packed theaters in American cities.
Taylor is ascendant, but Taylor also kind of sabotages himself through. We might describe this as a conservative temperament, or even timidity, if we wanted to be more rough with him. He arranges this truce, and then eventually publishes an open letter suggesting that the best way to subdue Mexico is for him to hold his line and not advance, which seriously upsets the administration. They want to conclude the war, and so Polk turns to other leadership. But in the meantime, in September, down in Mexico City, General Jose Salas, who has overthrown General Paredes, he has started a federalist policy. He's kind of acting at the behest of Paredes's rebels, who are opposing his policy of centralization, the nationalization of the Mexican Constitution. Salas has hearkened back to the old Constitution of 1824, which is connected to the Philadelphia Constitution, in that it creates a federal sort of structure for Mexico. Salas also reconnects with Santa Anna, who had been exiled by Jose Herrera back at the start of the Mexican War. Santa Anna had been in Cuba, certainly watching for opportunities in Mexico. And Santa Anna had also been in touch with President Polk. So Polk remembers Santa Anna in Washington with President Andrew Jackson, and Santa Anna's pledged role in paving things over for positive relations with the Texans and the Americans, and his various pledges that he made then. Notwithstanding, he did not follow through on any of them when he went back to Mexico. He was quite a turncoat when it came to all of his pledges to the Americans to advance their policies. But Polk is willing to give Santa Anna another try. So he allows Santa Anna to run the American blockade into Veracruz, to unite with General Salas, who is the acting president of Mexico. Salas then installs Santa Anna as the new president, because in this time of war, everyone is looking for competent leadership, and Santa Anna really is the best careerist available. He's a well of charisma. If nothing else, he has had military successes. He's also had military disasters, but when you have a small bench of talent, you look for the talent that you've got. And Santa Anna was bringing some things to the table. He had no intention to serve Polk's aims in Mexico. He was personally ambitious, yet again. And even though Santa Anna was the great centralizer and nationalist in his period in power, he unites with Jose Salas, who is the Federalist. Salas wants to restore the 24 Constitution. Santa Anna had overthrown that Constitution.
That's all the Texans wanted, was to go back to the 24 Constitution.
Indeed. So this is obviously weird, but we also see the Mexicans are in desperate straits, and they are willing to put aside their own internal differences in favor of uniting against their common enemy. So Salas transfers power to Santa Anna. Santa Anna then boasts that he will put together an army of 25,000 and crush Taylor. You remember, Taylor only has less than 6,000 effectives now. Volunteers, not professional soldiers, though they brought out the West Point grads to lead them. They don't have a large body of regulars, trained soldiers there. And Santa Anna is accumulating a lot of soldiers. He goes to Mexico City, appoints yet another interim president who's his own controversy, and Santa Anna is going to lead these men personally into battle. He doesn't come up with 25,000. He comes up with about 15,000. But Taylor only has about 4,500 at this stage. And so they maneuver outside of Saltillo, where General Amudia had successfully withdrawn his men out of Monterey. And in late February, February 22nd, which happens to be George Washington's birthday, they meet just outside of Saltillo at Buena Vista. So Taylor has his 4,500. Santa Anna has about 15,000. Once again, the Mexicans are demoralized and badly equipped. Santa Anna, ever ambitious, sends an aide to talk to Taylor's aide under a flag of truce. He meets this curious guy from New York. I wonder if he's Scotch-Irish, even if he's from New York. His name is William Wallace Bliss. Santa Anna's message is surrender. You're surrounded. You're outnumbered. Bliss. Oh, did you get that? Did I
No.
fade? Okay.
You did.
All right.
Bliss said what?
Bliss responds, I beg leave to say I decline acceding to your request. Which is
That's
pretty
so
good
great.
response.
Yeah, that's great.
So Santa Anna does have numbers on his side, so he maneuvers and assaults Taylor's position. Santa Anna attacks at Buena Vista. He has early success. He attacks Indiana division. The Hoosiers break, overwhelmed with numbers. Illinois regiments support the Hoosiers, and they retreat in order, but with casualties.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
We remember that Illinois sent a great number of volunteers to the front to join Taylor, one of the more popular volunteer states. As the flank turns on that corner with Santa Anna's assault, the Mississippi, Arkansas, and Kentucky regiments go to strengthen the flank, and they hold their line. So the Arkansas regiment, well, one of them anyway, led by Archibald Yell, Yell, a famous pioneer of Arkansas and namesake of Yell County, Arkansas, named after the fallen hero at Buena Vista. Also among the casualties is Henry Clay Jr., the son of Senator Henry Clay, an officer in the Kentucky Regiment, volunteers. As the flank is being pressed, one West Point graduate, Braxton Bragg, he is ordered personally by General Taylor to hold his position and maintain fire at all costs. Taylor returns to Bragg as Bragg is dishing out canister shot at close range at the assaulting Mexicans. And Taylor tells Bragg, double shot your guns and give them hell, Bragg. So he loads double canister into his howitzers and starts laying into the Mexicans. This is where Bragg makes one of his major statements in his career. He becomes a hero of Buena Vista for his gallant stand with his batteries. The Mexicans had carried the field against the poor Hoosiers, who no doubt were valiant, but we're talking about, a few hundred men against a few thousand Mexicans. The disparity is incredible here. The Mexicans do capture stands of arms and flags from the Hoosier regiments. These are taken down to the Mexican War College and displayed as trophies of war long time afterwards. They may very well still be there for all I know. It's on these grounds that the Mexicans under Santa Anna, they're looking for anything they can call a success. They return.
Oh no.
Oh,
Hello.
Okay.
you're
all right.
back.
Is he
Okay.
Is he plugged in?
Yeah, he should be.
Okay.
Say something. Yes, you're still
Yes.
plugged in.
All right. So the Mexicans are looking for anything they can call a success. They call Buena Vista a victory. It is not. The Americans lose 267 dead, 500 wounded. Mexicans lose 600 killed, 1,000 wounded, 2,000 captured.
Hmm.
So this is a significant blow to Santa Anna's force. Santa Anna withdraws from Saltillo towards the center of Mexico. Calling it a victory, he reveals his hand by his withdrawal. By this point, Taylor's open letter, so he publishes this. This is broadly known. He illustrates his inclinations for strategy. He says that the American path to victory is to maintain the line in northern Mexico as the government in Mexico falls into chaos and can no longer equip their troops. They'll be forced to negotiate. This obviously is not at all what the administration wants. They want initiative. They want a plan. The American victory at Buena Vista has opened the road to Mexico City. Taylor does not want to go down that road. And it's one thing for him to say that in private correspondence. It's another thing for him to make this a public matter. His open letter it seals the deal with Polk. Polk knows that Taylor is not the man to win this. And up at Polk's side in Washington is the great Winfield Scott, veteran of 1812. Scott had served in the Seminole War with distinction. He had served in the Black Hawk War. He's got good grounds to be the greatest American soldier. Just on his own reputation. He's extremely capable. Scott says, we need to open a second front, increase the pressure. Let's launch an amphibious assault out of New Orleans. Let's take the Navy down to Veracruz. Let's land an army on the beaches of Veracruz and assault Mexico City overland. Taylor can stay where he is. We're going to go down with a fresh force. And Polk responds by making him the supreme commander. So Scott then gets underway, coming out of New Orleans. The time frame for this is one of the things that is most extraordinary to me. He moves his men. I'm sorry, I have some noise here I can't do anything about. Moves his men to New Orleans, launches this amphibious assault on Veracruz, lands his men on March 7th, 1847. 10,000 landed in small craft from the Navy flotilla.
You're here.
Okay. Landed in small craft from the Navy flotilla just out of range of the forts of Veracruz, and they do not lose a single man in the landing.
Huh.
This is the Americans have made very minor amphibious assaults in their military history. This is gigantic in comparison. We're talking 10,000 men, and they didn't lose a single man, not from an accident, not from enemy fire. Then they lay siege to the massive coastal fortifications at Veracruz. The main fort, which stands outside of the harbor proper, has 100 guns and is a complete masonry fortification. There are a number of large coastal fortifications at Veracruz. Winfield Scott lays siege to them for 18 days and loses only 13 killed and takes all the forts. So
No way.
the disproportion of this victory is stupendous. It cannot be understated.
So American Spirits has now gone beyond my reading of the Mexican War so far. So this is all news to me, and that is incredible.
Well,
looking good
Scott,
for the halls of Montezuma.
No.
Indeed. Well, a preview of coming attractions, since we're coming to the end of the hour. Scott brings with him his famous aide, adjutant, one Captain Robert Edward Lee of Virginia.
Indeed.
Who is Scott's main engineer and reconnaissance officer. So Lee is tasked for placing batteries to reduce the forts of Veracruz. To make things more efficient, they bring the gunners from the Navy, and they give this Army officer command of batteries. Yes, go ahead.
So I'm currently reading about General Wool, who is going to meet up with Taylor before the Battle of Buena Vista. That's as far as I am right now. Robert E. Lee is with Wool, just crossing the Rio Grande. That's where I'm at. How does he get to Veracruz?
They move him down.
Wow.
So he does serve outside of Buena Vista as an aide to General Wool, and then he's transferred over to join General Scott for the assault on Veracruz.
Oh wow.
So I don't know if Lee has experience with Scott at this point. Lee is a West Point graduate. He may have had some
He
experience
must
with
have.
Scott.
Just going by Grant's memoirs, Grant writes voluminously about his experiences at West Point with General Scott. I have to imagine Lee encountered him as well.
Well, Scott had an eye for talent, and he obviously saw promise with Lee, and he gives Lee these very interesting assignments at Veracruz. So Lee is commanding the construction of batteries to reduce the fortresses at Veracruz, and they're moving cannon from the fleet as well as Army artillery. They're building these fortified batteries to reduce the forts. And Lee is in this weird position where he's in command of sailors, building batteries, moving cannon, ordering barrages. And this is expertly done. Lee has quite a knack for surveying. He's very experienced with this. The Army sent him to St. Louis to engineer the path for the Mississippi River. The Mississippi is washing away the harbor at St. Louis, and Lee is given this very interesting engineering and surveying job as one of his first tasks. Yes, Riley.
So I didn't really know this until reading for the Mexican War for my show. The Americans act a lot like the Roman legionnaires when it comes to just impromptu building forts and fortifications and bridges and pontoons. I don't know if we're ever really taught that, or I guess I didn't know that about this era of the the American army and the American military and the American volunteers. But they just go out and they build forts in a couple days, massive forts with huge, thick walls. They carry cannons in there, and these forts never fall. And I guess that continues into the Indian Wars, but yeah, and it's kind of remarkable. What you're telling me right now, obviously I haven't read it yet, but yeah, that is incredible.
One of the aspects here that really impresses me, we talked about the esprit of the volunteer forces, how the men are naturally led by their political classes into battle, that the politicians themselves have martial ability and initiative. They're leading their own constituents. That itself is just extraordinary. That is so Republican. It shows that those connections are real. It's not just a front for exploitation or something.
Mm-hmm.
And also the lines of service, the Army and the Navy, they are working very well together. One of the aspects of this that I think really stands out is there's not all this jealousy between the branches of service. You typically see this when you are reading the histories of campaigns. You see it all the time in the Civil War, for instance, where the Navy is jealous of the Army's glory. The Army is jealous of the Navy. They don't want the Navy to have a victory where they think they could win it on the land, and so on. And there's a lot of conflict between the branches, lots of conflict between the officers, makes the war very colorful. It's not to say there isn't conflict during the officers here, but the fact that Scott was such a compelling leader that he was able to move the Army with the Navy and then move Navy resources and sailors in a land siege after he made his landing at Veracruz, and that this is all conducted so smoothly and so quickly. This is very unusual.
Mm.
It's very unusual for this to happen. And the speed in which Scott moves his army, coordinates with the Navy, moves his men down so quickly. These people are just working extremely well together. They have single purpose. They're very cooperative.
Do you know how many volunteers Scott had with him?
No, I don't have those numbers, but that would be a
Okay.
good thing to look up.
Well, stay tuned to my upcoming episodes. I'll have that number in a month or so.
All right. Well, we are ashore at Veracruz. Robert E. Lee has entered the chat, and on that cliffhanger, we will leave it for next week on American Spirits. Before we go, we have some super chats to cover, beginning with Bolero 393, an American Spirits stalwart, sends us $10 to say, here's 1/1,000,000th of the money paid in the Gadsden purchase for your troubles in explaining the events leading to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Huzzah for America and this illustrious panel. Well, bully for you, Bolero 393. Thank you very much. Bolero 393 repeats the performance with a further $2, saying, "Nervous tummy, General Twiggs." Indeed, it was a very nervous tummy he suffered from. Forrest Redeemed gets into the action with a very marginal super chat for $5. He says, "Reminds me of how Governor Morris died. He liked the ladies so much he got a sexually transmitted infection and then got an infection trying to, quote unquote, clear the tube with a whalebone and died. Well, the wages went." And finally,
no, thank you.
Yeah. Bolero 393 rejoins the fray, paying $10 to subject us to what I can only describe as scurrilous cope. Bolero 393, cope. Hoosiers being overrun by Mexicans and Illinois helping us beat them back instead of permitting Mexico to overrun them too. 21st century history has thus far been a reversal of the events of Buena Vista. Disgusting, Bolero 393. All right, that is all the super chats. Gentlemen, before we get out of here, do we have any closing thoughts on this phase of the Mexican War?
I'm excited to hear about it before I even read about it.
It's an incredible period of unity of purpose.
Nice if we could get that back.
Amen.
All right, Mr. Bagby, speaking of unity of purpose, what should the chat all go immediately to Tall Man Books and buy right now?
Well, you can go to my Twitter handle at Tallman Books, where I have been doing lots of Huey P. Long posting recently.
Ah,
So not specifics about Long, but I guess remarks about American heroism and leadership. But I have several books that I've recently gotten into print. I've got General Gordon's memoirs, Reminiscences of the Civil War. Gordon, the great general from Georgia in the war. And I have the memoirs of Admiral Raphael Sims, who was in the Mexican War too. And unfortunately had his ship capsize outside of Veracruz. Kind of a disaster. Admiral Sims's ship capsized outside of Veracruz. It was kind of a light draft vessel with a particularly tall mast, and a gale came out of nowhere and capsized it. But he had experience in the Navy in the Mexican War too. But his memoirs are very interesting. He was a much feared commerce raider, and it's a great adventure story. I believe I've got the only copy that's been formatted. It's not facsimile. Go and find the memoirs of Raphael Sims, Memoirs of Service Afloat. You can find that on my Twitter handle.
it was not a capsizing, it was a tactical inversion. Mr. Wayne Riley, what do you have to plug for us?
Just the American Southwest History Show. Everywhere you get your shows. Thomas Wayne Riley, that's it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. It has, as always, been thrilling and fascinating. Chat, we will see you again next week for American Spirits. Have a wonderful night.